Okay, so I've got a game that's going to be tough. I'm telling you now because I've done it myself and I know it. You, for an entire week, it's got to be multiple days because you're going to really be awful at it at first. You can't just do it for one day. You got to get in there and practice it for a while. But for an entire week, let's say, you can't say the things that you don't want. You can only say the things that you do want. All right? So you can't say, like, I don't want this dog standing over here, walking in the leaves next to me, trying to mess with me while I'm trying to do a video. Or I don't want to have to get up at 7:30 tomorrow. Or I don't want to have to eat that for dinner tonight. Or I don't want all these things to do. Or I don't want you to keep tapping me that way. Or whatever. You have to say the things that you do want instead. So change it and be like, I want you to sit next to me still and not lick me in the face, dog. Or I want to be able to sleep in tomorrow until whatever time. And, you know, whatever the things that you do want. It's a very interesting exercise because when we sit around saying all the things that we don't want, it's definitely that complainy stuff. And complaining or saying what we don't want is valuable. I'm not trying to knock it. I mean, it lets us know what we don't want. But sometimes we don't take it to the next step and actually think about what we do want instead, because that's sort of the more important thing, right? I mean, that's the thing you're going to go after. That's the thing you're going to take action on. But also, we don't usually communicate it. I mean, you'll notice right away that you're like, oh, I say all the things that I don't want, but I never really get around to saying the thing. Like if someone's tapping me, it's like, I don't want you to keep tapping me like that. But I don't actually say, I'd love for you to sit next to me and I really like having you next to me, but I'd like you to be like massaging my shoulder or holding my hand or just laying sweetly in my lap or something, you know, period. And not even instead of tapping me. I mean, of course, the tapping is what brought it up and it is instead of you tapping me. But ultimately, we don't even take the time to say like, man, I would really like you to sit next to me. Even if you weren't tapping me, I would still have been over here wanting you to just like hold my hand and sit sweetly next to me or whatever. So saying what we do want instead ends up being this really interesting exercise in communication, because we are now communicating more than we usually do and having to reach in there and figure out what it is that we want to communicate, what it is that's actually true. What do I actually want? I mean, it's really quick for me to like protest and say, I don't want that, you know, but then going the extra mile and figuring out, well, what do I want? What am I a yes to? And saying it, communicating it, putting it out there, putting it into words, sharing it with another person, that's a whole new experience. And it might even feel, I have heard other people say that it feels really vulnerable for them. I have felt that too. But in different ways. Like I tend to be a little more okay with vulnerability than some people, but you know, that it's like kind of nervous to let other people know what you actually do want. Like that it might be almost like make your cheeks flush or something to say, I want you to sit next to me and hold my hand. What I would really like, because it's almost like a vulnerable, what I'd really like is a massage from you. Like if you, instead of were tapping me, were just like stroking my face and saying sweet things to me, I would prefer that. And I can see how that's like, you know, that's a little like cheek flush or a little sensational to say. It's like, ooh, that makes me feel like a little nervous or just a lot of things because I'm saying things that are really true. And I'm also putting myself out there because maybe you don't want to, or maybe I'm requesting something of you. So I feel like I'm asking something that might be, you know, taking your energy, or you might not have the time. Like, oh God, do you really want to just sit there and massage me? Or, oh, I feel greedy for asking, you know, for asking this kind of thing. But the thing is, you know, it doesn't mean they have to do it. That's the point of complaining, though. Like, you know, when we do complaining and we say what we don't want, there is actually kind of this air of controlling and getting people to do what we want them to do in it. Because we're like, why do I have to get up at 7:30? And we're kind of complaining at life. Like, I want this to change. Okay, then what would you rather? You know, like life says, like, don't just try to manipulate or control or like complain and bitch at me. Tell me what you do want, you know, make an actual request. Like, ask me a question and I might say yes, you know. So instead of being like, God, stop tapping me, you know, why do you always have to tap me? Instead, making a request of like, hey, could you please, like, what I actually want? Or, you know, would it be okay if you just stroked my face and said loving things to me? Would you do that? You know, and what's the worst that can happen? Like, no? I mean, and I know a lot of people feel like, oh, rejection. I don't want to have to say what I do want. And there might be situations. I mean, that's going to be the fun of this game. There might be situations when you're in like a professional setting and it's kind of weird to say what you want, you know, like, hey, I really want you to, you know, take whatever I'm saying and pay attention to it and, you know, not give me a lot of trouble about it. Or, okay, you know, and it might be strange because it might not be the context that's usually called for, where you're usually saying, hey, don't, you know, grab that other silk, because I teach silks. Don't keep swinging around. I don't, you know, instead I'm going to say what I do want. Can you look at me when I'm talking and can you listen to what I'm saying and then show me that you've heard it by doing exactly that? Okay, you know, that might be a different thing that they're not used to hearing. And, you know, in my situation, I'm like teaching silks and I'm talking about some kid in my mind that's, you know, swinging around doing stuff they're not supposed to. But there's all kinds of ways I can imagine this coming up and being kind of weird. Like, I don't usually say what I actually want from you. I just let you know when you've crossed a boundary and it's a no, I don't want. But it's an interesting exercise. It's an interesting exercise in kind of having the courage and the daring attitude that's willing to do something a little different and weird. And then you get to notice yourself and see like, whoa, dude, I say a lot of things I don't want. Or it's really hard for me to even figure out what I do want. Or it's really challenging for me to admit I know what I want. That's not the problem, but it's hard for me to say it and admit it. And why? Because it feels like I'm a burden to other people, or it feels like I'm going to get rejected, or, you know, these are things you just end up learning about yourself. This is why this is kind of cool stuff to try and to do. Plus, you get some really good communication skills, you know, doing this, like I said, going the extra mile and saying the things that you actually do want. And you get to kind of prove to yourself how making an actual request, even if you think that it's like, oh no, I better not, like, you know, sort of be a burden like that to someone. It's actually more burdensome to hear the complaints. I mean, making an actual request is this really harmless thing. It kind of takes the scariness out of that, because you have to just keep doing I'm only going to say what I do want. And you got to throw yourself out on the line like that. And you see that it's not as big of a deal as you think. It's actually pretty easy. It's actually pretty simple. And the person can just say yes or no. And at least you were clear. And, you know, the person on the other end of it is usually pretty thankful or like, wow, you know, relieved, because they just got a lot of information that was so much more clear. Someone just made a very direct and easy request of what they do want. Like, what I do want is to be able to sleep in tomorrow. And so could I do that? You know, could I do that and change around my appointments or whatever? And it just gives you a more proactive feel, because you are instead pointing out or calling attention to the things that you do want. And then they're in front of your face and you can take more action on them, instead of just being like, oh, I ain't waking up at 7:30. It's like, I want to wake up at 10, or I want to not have to do anything until 10 so that I can have a really leisurely morning. And when you're saying the things you do want, they seem more doable. It's more proactive. It's like, oh, okay, well, I guess I could do that. I could probably change my schedule around or trade with so-and-so or cancel this or that and shift it to later, and I could probably get that for myself. Or you start to see, even if you can't immediately do that, you start to see ways that you can. You're starting to be proactive about what it is that you don't like because you're focusing on what you would want. And then so you start to see ways that that might happen more easily, more readily. That's what's in front of your face instead of all of the what I don't want complaining stuff. So see how it goes. Like I said, definitely for a few days, a week. I'd like to say a week, but definitely for a few days, because the first day is going to be rough. You're going to mess up or miss all the time, where you're like, oh, I just did it. I did it. I already complained. It already came out of my mouth. I just said what I didn't want. I already broke the rules. And then you can go back and wait a minute. What I meant to say was, I do want this, you can correct yourself. But then it'll be interesting to see how quickly or not quickly it becomes a pattern, and you can actually catch yourself before that thing comes out of your mouth, and you can redirect and do what you do want instead. So see what you think.